Today is June 18th, 2025. The US-Israeli war on Iran continues. And even though the United States is claiming that it may join in on this war, this has always been a US war fought through Israel, just as the US is waging war on Russia through Ukraine, just as the US is preparing to wage war on China through the island province of Taiwan and the Southeast Asian nation of the Philippines. So let's go to the first article. Let's just try to figure out what is going on at this moment. This is from Reuters. Trump calls for Iran's unconditional surrender as Israel-Iran air war rages on. Now, this was all supposedly to disarm Iran of a nuclear weapons program. There is no evidence actually exists. I will get into the US Director of National Intelligence saying that there are no nuclear weapons and how that fact, that reality is being ignored, and a justification for war based on a deliberate lie, fabrication, is being pushed forward instead. But let's read what this Reuters article has to say. President Donald Trump called for Iran's unconditional surrender and warned U.S. patience was wearing thin, but said there was no intention to kill Iran's leader for now, as the Israel-Iran air war raged for a fifth day. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said, meanwhile, that Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei could face the same fate as Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, who was toppled in a US-led invasion and hanged in 2006 after a trial. So he may suffer the same fate as another regional leader whose country was lied about by the United States, invaded, and burned to the ground. I want to remind everyone, though, as President Trump is trying to go from pretending to negotiate with Iran to now openly calling for regime change and the complete surrender of Iran, this was always the plan. It was always the plan. I've said this over and over again. Going back to US policy papers from 2009, Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Toward Iran, under Chapter 1, an offer Iran shouldn't refuse. This is what it says. I'm going to read this again. For those who favor regime change or a military attack on Iran, either by the United States or Israel, there is a strong argument to be made for trying this option. They're talking about posing as seeking diplomacy. Inciting regime change in Iran would be greatly assisted by convincing the Iranian people that their government is so ideologically blinkered that it refuses to do what is best for the people and instead clings to a policy that could only bring ruin on the nation. And that's what Israeli and soon US strikes on Iran are meant to convince the Iranian people of. Their government is bringing ruination to Iran. The ideal scenario in this case would be for the United States and the international community to present a package of positive inducements so enticing that the Iranian citizenry would support the deal, only to have the regime reject it. In a similar vein, any military operation against Iran will likely be very unpopular around the world. And why is that? Because everyone knows that it's just another lie to justify another war of aggression, and required the proper international context, both to ensure the logistical support the operation would require, and this admits that even the US would require logistical support in the region to carry out a large-scale military operation against Iran. So obviously Israel required logistical support, which the United States provided. The US is already a direct party to this war. And to minimize the blowback from it, the best way to minimize international opprobrium and maximize support, however grudging or covert, is to strike only when there is widespread conviction that the Iranians were given but rejected a superb offer, one so good that only a regime determined to acquire nuclear weapons and acquire them for the wrong reasons would turn it down. Under those circumstances, the United States or Israel, that is what this whole policy paper constantly talks about, either a US or Israeli strike on Iran. They have obviously opted to use Israel. Could portray its operation as taken in sorrow, not anger, and at least some in the international community would conclude the Iranians brought it upon themselves by refusing a very good deal. And I've also pointed out elsewhere in the document a chapter titled, Leave It to Bibi, Allowing or Encouraging an Israeli Military Strike. Let's come down to here. goal. The goal of this policy option would be to destroy key Iranian nuclear facilities in the hope that by doing so, it would significantly delay Iran's acquisition of an indigenous nuclear weapons capability. However, in this case, an added element would be that the United States would encourage and perhaps even assist the Israelis in conducting the strikes themselves, in the expectation that both international criticism and Iranian retaliation would be deflected away from the United States and onto Israel. That is exactly what we see playing out in real time right now. Another article, CBS News. Trump says he wants real end to Iran's nuclear program, not just an Iran-Israel ceasefire. So again, this is all about just erasing Iran. This is another regime change operation. President Trump said he wants a real end to Iran's nuclear program, with Iran giving up entirely its enrichment activities. Elsewhere, they're demanding that they also give up their ballistic missile capabilities, their only means of defending themselves against unprovoked strikes on Iran by both the US and Israel. Israel's already repeatedly attacked Iran unprovoked, and Iran responds. And then when Iran responds, they cite that as justification for their next attack. And unfortunately, there's still people out there buying this. He said he was not just working toward a ceasefire to end the war between Iran and Israel, which has claimed at least 24 lives in Israel and hundreds in Iran as it enters its 5th day. I didn't say I was looking for a ceasefire, Mr. Trump told reporters on Air Force One after cutting short his time at the G7 summit in Canada. We're looking for better than a ceasefire. Also, while he was on Air Force One, he was asked about the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and her assessment that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon and that the supreme leader has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. When asked about that on Air Force One, the assessment from Gabbard that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon, Mr. Trump told reporters, "I don't care what she said. I think they're very close to having them." So it doesn't matter what the actual evidence suggests. He says he thinks they have nuclear weapons, so they're going to proceed with war anyway. And this is what the US has repeatedly done all throughout the region, all along Iran's borders, which is why Iran is seeking a means to defend itself in the first place. And you will still see Americans and other people across the West and people who are pro-West say somehow Iran is the problem. Iran has not invaded a single nation. This entire 21st century has not invaded a single nation. The US has gone all the way around to the other side of the planet and invaded multiple nations all across the Middle East, burning them to the ground, and they now exist as failed states as a result. Now, I want to talk about the actual fighting, and I want to show you this article. And for people who have been following my coverage of Ukraine and are familiar with Western propaganda supporting Ukraine, this narrative is going to sound very, very familiar. This is from the BBC. And this is a reoccurring theme all across the Western media. Israel's smaller, sophisticated military opposes larger Iran. Israel's conflict with Iran may look like a mismatch on paper, a nation of 9 million taking on a giant of the Middle East home to 88 million. But Israel's formidable and sophisticated military forces, with an arsenal largely, but not exclusively, provided by the United States, are enabling it to overpower a much larger enemy, except absolutely every military capability Israel possesses is a product of US assistance. The US not only just hands them weapons that they are using to carry out this war of aggression against Iran, all of the supposed Israeli systems that they're using, including these missile defense systems, were all funded by the US government, and many of them co-developed, co-produced with the United States. This very same narrative we heard about how Ukraine is smaller than Russia, but their military is more professional, they have better technology, they're smarter, they're better organized, when in reality it's just an extension of US military power, which is why it is persisting in this war being waged against Russia, again, by the US through Ukraine. The same goes for Israel fighting Iran. It is a US war being fought through Israel against Iran. And I'm going to talk to you all about what the US has done to help Israel specifically fight this war, and also all of the military systems they are using in this war, how they are a result of U.S. backing. Let's go to ABC News. Trump tells ABC Israel strikes on Iran excellent and warns more to come. And he knows because the United States planned these, organized them, and worked with Israel to implement them. A source familiar with the intelligence on the strike told ABC News the U.S. provided exquisite intelligence and will help defend Israel if needed. And we're watching that happen right now, again, in real time. And when they say exquisite intelligence, they mean intelligence Israel could not carry these strikes out without. So this could not have happened unless the U.S. assisted them in it. That is what they are telling you, especially against ballistic missiles, which are expected to be launched from Iran. So that's what the U.S. is going to help Israel defend against. So far, Trump had told the Wall Street Journal on Friday that the U.S. knew what was going on and was aware of Israel's plans to attack, again, because it is a U.S. plan. It is a U.S. war fought through Israel. I hear people make the argument that Israel can decide these things on their own. But when you really, really think about it, you go back to first principles. Iran is not an actual threat to Israel. So Israel pursuing a war against Iran does not serve its actual best interest in any shape, form, or way. Iran does not want war with Israel. Iran does not want war with the United States. America's own policy papers engineering an unprovoked war of aggression against Iran admit it page after page after page. And I've covered this for years and years. This paper by the Rand Corporation, also 2009, admits that even if Iran had nuclear weapons, they would use it as a deterrent not to unilaterally strike Israel or the United States, because they would know that it would be certain self-destruction as well. So Israel has no actual real reason to wage a war with Iran. It is on the other side of the region, and it poses no threat to Israel or its actual interests. What it does pose a threat to is U.S. primacy over the region, its ability to control the region, to topple governments, assume control over these nations, politically capture them, and use them to further its influence both over the region and around the world. And I'm going to play this clip for you of Steve Bannon and General Mike Flynn openly talking about what this is really all about. Let's listen.
China, China, China. That's what I want your audience to understand. So a couple of things. Israel is fighting their war, and we are, in fact, supporting it. And it's really protecting Western civilization from a psychotic regime that wanted nuclear weapons and was very, very close to having them. Number two, we have to allow Israel to finish the job that when it does, as it is in the midst of finishing this job, and it's going to take a little bit, it will allow the United States to fully shift to focusing on China. The third thing is a positive, this is really important, a positive U.S. relationship with an Iranian regime. So whatever the regime is that rises up out of the ashes, if we have a positive relationship with that regime, that really benefits the United States of America, particularly against China, and it weakens China. Number four, a victory by Israel. Okay, and I'm not talking about, American troops and all this other stuff, but a victory by Israel, that it really allows us the expansion. It allows like sort of the expansion of the Abraham Accords, right? This is a signature Trump policy, Steve. You're very familiar with that. Signature Trump policy, so it allows an expansion of that. Number five, the defeat of Iran and stabilizing that region, because Iran is the most destabilizing country in that region right now. Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, et cetera, they control all of Iraq right now, other than Kurdistan. So I want people to understand that. Just look at the statement that was put out by the Iraqi Prime Minister today. It's unbelievable. Number six, establishing, or this victory, a victory by Israel, establishes the perception, if not the reality, of U.S. global dominance and certainly Israeli dominance in that region.
So that is what the policy papers laid out years ago. That is what people are now, as the mask falls off, that is what they are saying this is all about. Has nothing to do with the nuclear program, has nothing to do with some perceived threat. Iran is opposing U.S. hegemony in the region. It needs to be removed as an obstacle so the U.S. can control the region, politically control the region's foreign policy, cut their ties and their cooperation with China to isolate China so that the U.S. can then work on subordinating, subjugating China as well. Same goes for Russia. When Iran retaliated against Israel by firing ballistic missiles towards Tel Aviv, a U.S. official confirmed to ABC News that the U.S. was assisting in shooting them down missiles targeting Israel. So the U.S. is a party to this war. They provided Israel with intelligence, also logistical support. The attack would be impossible to conduct without. And now they are participating in the fallout of this unprovoked strike on Iran by trying to blunt Iran's ability to defend itself at this juncture. Now let's talk about these weapon systems that we keep hearing about. Israel's Arrow 3 missile defense system, Israel's David Sling, Israel's Iron Dome. All of these systems are paid for by the United States, admittedly. This is from 2023. Israel's Arrow 3 missile defense sale to Germany gets U.S. nod. Why do they need a U.S. nod to sell their own weapon system to Germany? Because the U.S. paid for it and helped develop it. The sale was made possible after U.S. Department of State officials notified senior defense leaders here of the approval. The step is necessary because the system is a co-development between Washington's Missile Defense Agency and the Israeli Missile Defense Organization, led by a local contractor, Israel Aerospace Industries. The Arrow 3 weapon is designed to intercept ballistic missiles during their flight paths outside of Earth's atmosphere. Its commercial production began following an intercept test in December 2015. And so people are constantly talking about the Iron Dome as if it's the entire missile defense system of Israel, but it is just one layer of it. The Arrow 3 and David Sling, also Patriot and THAAD systems provided by the U.S., as well as naval anti-air and anti-missile systems, are all being used as layered defenses against these incoming Iranian ballistic missiles, and also drones, by the way. Let's go to the next article. This is Breaking Defense. Israel orders more Iron Dome interceptors using new tranche of U.S. funding. So everything is being built and made possible, enabled, co-developed, funded by the United States. The summation of Israel's military power is simply an extension of American military power in the Middle East under a foreign flag. The Israeli Ministry of Defense said it's signed its first procurement deal using a recent tranche of U.S. aid funds to buy more interceptors for Israel's Iron Dome batteries, one of 3 tiers of Israel's multi-layered air defense system. It has been used widely in the last 15 months of war on multiple fronts to intercept rockets, drones, and other projectiles. Remember, this is an article from January 2025. That's the Iron Dome. Next. U.S. boosts Israel defense aid by $5.2 billion for laser tech, Iron Dome, David Slings. The additional $5.2 billion is focused on defense, including the Iron Dome, David Slings, and advanced laser system. And so all of these capabilities paid for by the United States, made possible, enabled by the United States, so that Israel can carry out wars of aggression on behalf of the U.S., take responsibility for the war, and absorb all retaliation for the wars. I think it's very important that people understand that point. Now, let's talk about the determining factors that could decide the outcome of this fighting. Here's an article from CNN. One number could define the Iran-Israel conflict's outcome. What number are they talking about? Of course, they're talking about the number of Iranian missiles that are available and can be launched at Israel. And the CNN article says the outcome of the defining conflict between Iran and Israel may depend on one simple number, which is at very best a rough estimate. Israeli military data and expert analysis says Iran has fired about 700 of its medium-range ballistic missiles at Israel over the past 14 months, leaving it with anything between 300 to 1,300 left in its stockpile. This remaining arsenal is subject to Israel's fierce air assaults of the past 5 days, with the IDF saying it has targeted at least a third of the surface-to-surface launchers that fire these missiles, possibly further reducing Iran's ability to strike back at Israel. Even the language of this CNN article is admitting that Iran is striking back, not striking at, striking back. The depletion of its arsenal may compound Iran's desire to negotiate its way out of the conflict and also intensify the ferocity of the Israeli campaign in the coming days, analysts have said, as Israeli air power finds itself almost unchallenged and Iran's nightly assaults on Israeli cities seem recently to have ebbed. Now, I have noticed over the last day or so that there are far fewer Iranian missiles being fired, and that could signify a problem with the availability or the ability to launch these missiles. They could be out of them, they could be out of launchers, there could be any number of problems with these missiles that are slowing down the pace of their strikes back at Israel, which is a means of raising the cost for Israel and the United States for continuing this war. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a bit. Let's continue with this article. It talks more about the numbers, including estimates by U.S. and Israeli sources. Few reliable estimates for Iran's stockpile exists, although U.S. CENTCOM's Commander General Keith McKenzie said in 2023 that they had more than 3,000 missiles of different ranges. A senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, again, another U.S. corporate financier-funded think tank, engineering wars of aggression around the globe, they said likely 1,000 to 2,000 of these were medium range, capable of spanning the 1,400 kilometers between Iran and Israel. He called the estimate at best a back-of-the-envelope calculation. According to the IDF, Iran used 120 medium-range ballistic missiles in its April 13th attack last year on Israel, another 200 on October 1st. You could see how measured Iran's response has been to Israeli aggression. U.S. enabled Israeli aggression each time, starting out with a smaller number of missiles. Then the second attack on Iran itself, they responded with more missiles. And now they're firing even more missiles. So 120 in April, 200 in October, and now a total of 380 in the past 5 days. This tally would deplete its overall known arsenal by a total of 700. But whether it leaves Tehran with an existential crisis over its missile deterrence, again, they are calling it a deterrence. It's just so much more blatant this time, isn't it? Depends on both the size of its initial stockpile and what damage Israel has done to Iran's military infrastructure since it began striking across the country on Friday. The few glimpses of the damage done to Iran's air defenses and missile production from Israeli strikes on October 26 have revealed a significant toll. So we have Admiral Tony Radakin, the UK's chief of the defense staff. Remember, these are the same people who constantly say Ukraine is winning the U.S. proxy war against Russia. He said in a December speech that 100 Israeli aircraft had fired as many missiles from as many miles away and took down nearly the entirety of Iran's air defense systems, which is obviously not true because they're using their air defense systems right now. It has destroyed Iran's ability to produce ballistic missiles for a year. So the first claim is patently false. The second claim, we have no idea what Iran's missile production capacity actually is. But recently, Israel has amplified the threat that Iran's missile production poses. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, not known for saying anything even closely related to reality, he said on Friday, as Israel launched its air campaign, that Iran had sped up its manufacture of ballistic missiles to 300 a month, which could leave them with 20,000 in 6 years. He did not provide evidence for the claim, nor does he provide evidence of any of his claims. Just please keep that in mind. These sources they're citing are highly unreliable. The article also says the 2024 strikes had destroyed the main facilities for manufacturing ballistic missile motors in Iran, creating severe limitations to the country's supply chain. Still, he notes that potential assistance from China in the coming months could boost production again. So I've had many people ask me, Brian, what can Russia, China, Pakistan, and others do? They could provide parts for ballistic missile production. They could provide actual ballistic missiles and launchers so that Iran can, as CNN refers to it, maintain their missile deterrent. And deterrent means you are defending yourself. You're not threatening anybody. You're not attacking anyone. You are deterring them from attacking you. CNN said that, not me. That is their language, not mine. Although it clearly describes the situation accurately. Now, there are also these extensive networks of tunnels. How extensive are they? How deep do they go? How many of them are there? How many missiles do they have hidden in them? Where are they hidden? And are there other facilities where missiles are stockpiled that need to be moved to these tunnels to be staged and then deployed? I don't know. I don't think anyone has an answer to that. I don't have access to that information myself. That could be a reason why there are pauses or a diminishing number of missiles, because the missiles they had ready to go have been launched and now they're staging the next batch. Maybe, or maybe they're just out of missiles. Maybe Israel has destroyed their stockpiles or destroyed enough of their launchers to hinder large-scale retaliatory missile strikes. Here's another article along the same theme. Israel-Iran conflict may last only as long as their missiles hold out. The intensity of Iran's barrages seems to be waning as it uses up its stock. Israel, meantime, is running through its supply of expensive missile interceptors. I have been talking about this for years in relation to the U.S. proxy war on Russia and Ukraine. The total number of Patriot missile interceptors, which are capable, supposedly on paper, of intercepting ballistic missiles, is less than 650 a year. Russia alone produces more Iskander ballistic missiles every single year. And the United States and its allies have been emptying out their Patriot missile interceptor inventories, sending it to Ukraine. Everything that can be spared is being sent there. They are incapable of producing interceptors faster than they're being spent in Ukraine. And there is a critical shortage worldwide now because of that. As a matter of fact, there was a critical shortage even before that. If people remember, the US was waging war on Yemen through Saudi proxies, and Saudi Arabia was using US Patriot missile launchers, and they were running out of interceptors, and the US was incapable of supplying them with more. They had to borrow interceptors from neighboring nations, also using US-made Patriot missile air and missile defense systems. There is this existing shortage. It was compounded by Ukraine, and now it is being astronomically accelerated amid this conflict with Iran. The Washington Post article says Israeli intelligence officials estimated that Iran had about 2,000 missiles capable of traveling 1,200 miles to hit Israel, but a significant fraction were destroyed the moment Israel's covert operatives in Iran and its fighter jets launched a surprise attack early Friday, kicking off the conflict. Again, they are admitting Israel provoked this war. Since then, Israeli military officials say that Iran has launched roughly 400 missiles from its remaining stockpile. This article is from today. And Israeli strikes have eliminated 120, or 1/3, of Iran's missile launchers. Moreover, Israeli officials announced Monday that they had obtained air superiority over Tehran ahead of schedule, meaning they could further limit the Iranian forces' ability to carry out launches. Already, the intensity of Iran's barrages appeared to be sharply dropping after firing more than 150 missiles on the first night of the conflict. Friday, Iran fired a barrage of just 10 on Tuesday afternoon. Israeli analysts cautioned that more than half of Iran's arsenal remains intact, and an unknown quantity of missiles may be hidden in underground depots. And while Israel has significantly degraded Iran's attack capabilities, mounting a defense has been costly for Israel. Now they're talking about how much all of this costs, but really money is no issue because the U.S. is paying for all of it. Money for Israel, it's no issue because the U.S. is funding all of this. And I should say the American taxpayers are funding all of this. Without resupplies from the United States, which are not available because the U.S. simply does not make enough of them, or greater involvement by U.S. forces, some assessments project Israel can maintain its missile defense for 10 or 12 more days if Iran maintains a steady tempo of attacks, which is why I say Iran's tempo, its pace of attacks dropping, should be an issue of concern. There's many reasons why it might happen, but if it's happening because they're out of missiles or they're out of launchers or some other serious problem, that does not bode well for Iran. There could be other explanations for this, and they still have missiles, and they will continue firing them. They're stockpiling them to see how large the U.S. involvement will be. I don't know, but you have to accept the possibility of all of these options. You cannot just pick and choose the ones you wish were true. So 10 or 12 more days if Iran maintains a steady tempo of attacks, said an individual briefed on U.S. and Israeli intelligence assessments, adding that as early as later this week, Israel's systems may only be able to intercept a smaller proportion of missiles because of the need to ration defense munitions. That is already happening. We see that already happening. They will need to select what they want to intercept, said the individual who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive matter. The system is already overwhelmed, which is what I just said. It is already overwhelmed. Then it talks about Israel's layered integrated air defense system, which I just mentioned a little bit earlier. Israel employs a multi-layered air defense system consisting of its famous Iron Dome, which intercepts lower altitude rockets, small, slower projectiles, the David Sling and Arrow systems, and expensive Patriot and THAAD missile systems delivered from the United States, and also U.S. systems operated by the U.S. across the region. Then it talks about losses on each side. They claim Israel has imposed greater casualties on the Iranian side, and they even talk about, in several cases, Israeli missiles and drones have struck densely packed apartment buildings to kill Iranian military officials and nuclear scientists in their homes. So they are destroying entire apartment buildings full of civilians, men, women, and children who are not participating in the hostilities in any shape, form, or way. They're killing all of these people to assassinate a single individual, a military officer asleep with their family, or a scientist who is not even part of the military. That is a war crime. That is an obvious war crime that the Washington Post is admitting Israel is carrying out. And that should surprise nobody. That is what Israel has been doing for many years. That is what the United States has been doing for many years. That is what the U.S. was revealed to have been doing in Yemen. Remember the Signal chat leak, and senior U.S. officials were admitting that they were striking and destroying and taking down entire apartment buildings to kill one suspected Ansar Allah official. And then it says Israel also struck the headquarters of Iran's state broadcaster after Defense Minister Israel Katz pledged that the mouthpiece of Iranian propaganda would disappear. So they're killing journalists. They're targeting and killing journalists. A war crime. And you only attack a nation's communications when you're trying to achieve regime change, not any sort of disarmament of its supposed nuclear weapons program. It's when you're trying to topple the entire country. Then you go after civilian infrastructure, communications, and of course, killing journalists helps facilitate that. After the strike, the Israel Defense Forces said it had targeted an Iranian military communication center, but did not offer evidence of a military presence at the location. So, the Israel and the United States doing what they always do. And again, just the casual frankness in these Western reports and people reading it and still framing this as a necessary war against Iran, they view as the problem. And then they interviewed another expert who says Iran's missile capabilities will continue to decline because Israel is now targeting its production facilities, assuming the regime doesn't change or assuming they don't agree to give up their missiles as part of a ceasefire. They're going to have a huge problem reconstituting their ballistic missile forces. That is going to be a big result of how much Israel is able to damage and destroy their production facilities for missiles. So, as I said in the very beginning, this is a numbers game between the number of missiles Iran is capable of firing at Israel in defense against Israeli strikes on Iran, which include targeting missile production, targeting launchers, targeting stockpiles of the missiles, and of course, all of the other targets Israel is striking at. Israel's air defense systems and Iran's air defense systems, their degradation is also going to factor into which nation is able to hold out longer in this conflict. And of course, Israel is an extension of U.S. military power in the region. So even if I hear people saying, Iran needs to break Israel's back, you cannot break Israel's back because it has no back. It is a tentacle coming off of the United States. And so if you want to break the back of what is responsible for all of this, you need to break the back of the United States, which Iran is incapable of doing. What it can do is survive. Now, people panic if Iran runs out of missiles, if Israel dismantles its air defense system and its missile launch capability. People are panicking. If Iran is able to maintain unity, social, political unity, and their military is able to continue fighting without air defense and without missile capabilities like Yemen has been doing for years and years, they could still fight for their survival. It is still possible. We just have to wait and find out. And one last point I want to touch on is this narrative that I hear being spread to justify war with Iran, U.S. war with Iran. This notion that the Iranian government is some sort of radical Islamist regime that simply hates Jews and wants to exterminate them, and that is why they are at odds with Israel. And here is the Jerusalem Post, Israeli media, here to tell you that that is not true, because the largest population of Jews in the Middle East outside of Israel live in Iran itself. This is from June 16th, 2025, so just a day or two ago. Iran's Jewish leaders call Israel's strikes savage Zionist aggression, urge daily missile salvos. And it's all about how the leaders in these Jewish communities across Iran are opposed to a foreign nation dropping bombs on their head. Who could have imagined? And down here, it says Jews in Iran, their presence in Iran dates back more than 3,000 years. And they put the Jewish population at around 3,000, although it says others put it at around 8,000 or even 10,000. So there's thousands and thousands of Jews living in Iran. And then I found this older article, also from a Jewish online magazine. All of these are pro-Israel, pro-Jewish publications. How Iran's Jews survive in Mullah's world. And it turns out they seem to be surviving quite well, quite comfortably, well accommodated. And this is all about these very, very different Jewish communities in Iran, across Iran. It's not just one community walled off somewhere. They have communities in major cities all across Iran. And this is a person talking about their experience in Iran, traveling from one community to the other. And it talks about the history of Jews in Iran and how Jews in Iran today live. And right here it says, and Jewish life in Iran can be rich. In Tehran alone, there are 13 active synagogues, 5 Jewish schools, 2 kindergartens, and a 100-bed Jewish hospital. And they're talking about an individual that they were interviewing who serves as a director at that hospital. There are active communities in several other cities, and then it lists all of the cities with institutions of their own. And the article goes on, and it has pros and cons. It says good things and bad things. And I challenge you to read through this. If you have this preconceived notion that Iran hates Jews and that's why they want to destroy Israel, read through this article. Do your own research online. And for people out there who are wondering what they can do to fight back against this push for war, take articles like this from the Jerusalem Post, this from Forward, and many other articles published over the years. When you see people repeating this lie, take these articles and post them. Take screenshots of them, post a link, and challenge people to read them and explain how their war propaganda can coexist with the reality documented by so many pro-Israel and pro-Jewish sources. So that is where things are right now. We have to keep a very close eye on this. We have to follow the facts. no matter where they go and no matter how uncomfortable they make us feel. Tuning in to messages telling you what you want to hear is not going to help in the long run, especially if things are going bad. You're going to be unpleasantly surprised. How many people were claiming that Syria would not collapse late last year when the US was pushing that final push to overthrow the Syrian government, to pave the way for this very war with Iran? Many people clung to that delusion that the Syrian government would prevail, and it is now collapsed. How many people on October 7th were cheering on Hamas, declaring Israel is done, only for that attack to precipitate the flattening of Gaza, the killing of thousands and thousands of innocent people, and the creation of a permissive environment across the entire region that allowed the US and Israel to dismember Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and topple the Syrian government and shape the battlefield regionally for this war on Iran itself. In hindsight, all of these people were wrong. And all of these people were wrong because they picked and chose what they wanted to hear and they threw everything out. They were not following the facts no matter where they brought them or however uncomfortable it made them. As analysts, if people are analysts, that is their job to do that. And people in the public, you need to be informed. You need to be informed to make decisions about your position on policies and your support or opposition to them. So it's very important that accurate information is put out there. It's important that people take the responsibility seriously to find out what is actually happening rather than indulge in what they wish was happening. I will continue keeping an eye on this. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Check the video description below for other places you can find and follow my work. I'm on Telegram. I'm on Rumble, X, of course, YouTube. In the video description will be all of these articles that I referenced, including the 2 policy papers that I read from, as are ways you can help support my work. I do not monetize any of my social media platforms. If ads pop up, feel free to skip them. They're not helping me out at all. If you do want to help support my work, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee and also Patreon. The links will be in the video description below. To everyone who has been helping out, whether it's a one-time donation or donations month to month, or if you don't have any resources to spare, you just help share my work with others and get the word out there. That is all greatly appreciated. That is what makes this work possible. So thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.